I am Patricia Panassi and I am an astrologer and business mentor. And I guide people, especially women, to find the peace and the energy within themselves. And they save tons of time, they save tons of energy, and their results will go through the roof. Now, in today's life, we are going to cover what happened in 2020 on an astrological point of view, but also how that ties into everything that happens and the lessons that you can learn from everything that went on this year. And we're not there yet because the biggest event, the biggest astrological event of the year is yet to happen in December. So we have that waiting for us in December. Now, just to give you a little bit of context, astrology has been on the rise these past few years and especially in 2020. With so much talk about astrology, I also see a branch of astrology that focuses a lot around the things that go wrong, the things that are happening, and it's like bad and bad situations are happening. But I just want to give you a little more context of the evolution of astrology and what is happening and the shifts that are happening in this moment. Now, astrology has been around for hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years. People have looked at the stars, people have mapped out what is happening and how that affects us here on Earth. But the astrology that we practice nowadays is very much based on the past few hundred years. And that type of astrology was written by men for men. So a lot of the concepts in astrology are very much based on masculinity, on the patriarchal way of looking at a society, of looking at how we should behave and how we should react. For instance, the water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, they have a lot of negative connotation to it because, oh, you're overly emotional, or intuition, no, like don't follow intuition, like that's some kind of concept that we can't grasp. These energies are mostly feminine type of energies, and for those men, and most of them are actually monks, emotions weren't really something they could work with. They couldn't control it. Because remember, a lot of the astrology was used by kings to determine when to go to war or how they can best influence the people in their kingdom. Then you cannot really use the, let's say, the Cancer energy. You need the harder, more masculine energy of Mars in Aries, or like the type of energy that helps you to go to war or to control people. So in astrology, there is no good or bad. There is no negative and positive. There is no right or wrong. It is our tendency to put labels on them that labels things as good as bad. There is no good or bad birth chart. I had people come up to me and say, oh, I've been told that this is such a difficult chart. No one's chart is difficult. Now, that doesn't mean that you will have more challenges maybe than other people have, but your life might be so much more interesting and rich because of the challenges and the way that you are able to move through those challenges, opposed to someone who has quote unquote a easy chart, because they can kind of get stuck in this place of they're not going anywhere, they're not doing anything, and it's not really moving forward. The same with 2020. A lot of people label it as bad, as difficult, as basically like a shit show. Because so much happened, so many things were going on, that a lot of people are labeling it as like the worst year ever. Now, we're still in the middle of it. So yes, we are in a challenging year. Like, I'm not going to say that 2020 is not challenging, because we all had our fair share of challenges. We all had a lot of contrast happening. That's not something that I'm going to diminish. And there is really a lot that is happening. But it's really the labels that we put on it that determine whether we think it's good or bad. 2020 had a lot of challenging aspect, and there is another challenging aspect coming up, or at least we judge it as such, because it kind of creates this shift in consciousness. It creates this change in how we look at ourselves, how we look at the world, and our comfort zone is being challenged. Our sense of feeling grounded, feeling present has been challenged. And that is difficult. Like, that is hard. But there is a good side to this. We can move with the energies. We can really allow ourselves to learn from what happened, so that in 2021 we are going through some big changes, not as big as this year, but through some big changes that will allow us to continue the growth, because that is in the end what it's really about. If you can see the challenges for what they are and then grow, that is really the key. I was listening to a podcast yesterday where an astrologer mentioned we need to keep asking questions. If we are satisfied with the answer that we get and then we kind of lean back, that's when we stop growing. That's when we stop evolving. That's when we stop learning. If we take the answer that we get and that is it, then we stay stuck. Then we cannot move. Let me quickly double check, because for some reason I cannot see anything that is happening here, or any comments or anything like that. So let me quickly double check if you can see me and hear me, and if there are any comments coming in that I'm missing. Awesome. So let's go back to what happened in 2020. Now, the interesting thing was we started the year off on a Cancer full moon, and we're going to end the year on a Cancer full moon. And in the middle of the year, in June and July, we had a new moon in Cancer. Now, when I was doing a forecast last year, I felt a very strong feminine energy to the year. I knew that there were going to be a lot of challenges, but I also felt this really strong feminine energy and feminine drive in the year that I was looking at. I couldn't have predicted that we were going to be in a global pandemic. That is something that I knew there were shifts that were going to present itself, but this big, I couldn't have predicted. Now, there are astrologers who go into that specific predictions. I choose consciously not to. Like, I could dive deeper into the details, but I consciously choose not to. And that is because we need to leave room for magic to happen. Now, of course, a pandemic is not magical at all, but we need to leave some space for things to unfold. If you have already filled in all the blanks, if you have quote unquote the answers, then you're going to stop looking for what else can happen. It is giving a person the solution without the person having to think about it. And in the end, that makes you lazy. That makes you it closes you off for other options. So as I'm preparing this series, as I'm going into 2021, I am giving you guidelines. I am giving you ideas. I'm not going to fill in all the blanks because that will completely destroy your imagination. It will stop you from looking for the solutions yourself. What I'm going to give you in this series is I'm going to give you tools how to work with the energy, how to work with these things. So when 21 arrives, you know how to keep your business going, even if something happens. Like I have seen business owners who thrived when the global lockdown happened. I've seen people who just retrieved and had to slow down and to take a moment, and all of that is good. But if I would have told you at the beginning of 2020, this is going to happen, you would have done business very differently. You might have started from a fear, from scarcity, from a lack mindset. Oh, it needs to happen now because we are going to go in lockdown. Instead of that, we went into the year thinking, let 2020 be my year. And it can still be your year. It can still be the year that you have found a way to reinvent yourself. Like I know I have done my fair share of reinventing this year. Also birthing a third baby, which is kind of revolutionary in and of itself. But I want to walk you through the key moments in 2020, and I want you to take a moment to reflect on those. Like you can write it in the comments, or if you're watching the replay, let me know, and let me know what your reflections are. Let me know what happened in those key moments. Maybe you have to get your calendar and see what happened to reflect back on those key moments in this year. I do have my notes ready because I don't know all the dates by heart. I know a lot of them, but I just want to make sure that I'm not forgetting anything. So we started the year with Pluto and Saturn coming together in Capricorn. This only happens every 34 years. So this is a very rare conjunction. Saturn is the responsible one. It likes structure. It likes responsibility. Pluto is the transformation. Pluto is the, okay, good, let's stir things up. Let's just make it completely different. And let's disrupt it in a way where it completely dies off so that we can start to build up again. Now, the year started with some public figures stepping out to change the way that we look at them. If you can remember, Meghan and Harry, they made a pretty bold movement to get out of the royal family in England or in the UK. That was like a disruption of a system, of something that we know and trust and understand, and then suddenly there's this sudden change. Now, Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter were really the key players of this year and really have pushed us in ways that we could have never imagined. So that was the first big event that happened. Now, in February, we had Mars going into retrograde in Pisces. So this year, Mercury retrograded only in water signs. So it retrograded in Pisces, it retrograded in Cancer, and then it went retrograde in Scorpio. So this whole year we had water retrogrades. Next year, for the first time, because last year we also had it in water, next year it's going to move into air signs. It's only going to retrograde in air signs. So that's a significant difference, because if a retrograde happens in a water sign, it touches upon our emotions much more. It really asks us and invites us to reflect on the way that we deal with our intuition. For instance, with a Pisces, with the retrograde in Pisces, it was much more about our intuition, about what we felt, about what was going on our internal side. And then in March, we had Saturn moving into Aquarius only for a little bit. Because Saturn at the moment is still in Capricorn. It hasn't moved back into Aquarius yet because it did the retrograde. So that was the first kind of taste of Saturn in Aquarius. Because when Saturn goes into Aquarius, there's almost a little bit of a contradiction. Saturn, like I said, is the responsible one, the one that slows everybody down to make sure everything goes by the rules. And Aquarius is the revolutionary, is thinking outside the box, changing everything. And when Saturn moves into Aquarius, it just did a little bit at the beginning of this year. Saturn already had a taste of how we can restructure things on a deep level. How can we, on a government level, because Saturn also rules like government and politics, how can we restructure that in a way that's like completely different, completely out of the box? Then in April, we had the first of 3 Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions. Now, every time when the outer planets, the slower moving planets come together, it usually happens in threefold or in fivefold. It depends a little bit how slow they move, but threefold because first they're both direct, then they both go into retrograde, so they meet up when they move backwards, and then they meet up again when both planets go direct. So that was what happened with Jupiter and Pluto. They met 3 times. So in April, they met in June, and they met just last week on November 12th. So what happens when Jupiter and Pluto come together? Jupiter is like the expansive one, the seeing all of the opportunities, seeing the positivity, expanding everything it comes close to. So when Pluto comes close to Jupiter, which is what I said, it was a death and rebirth cycle. It is the transformation. When Jupiter comes to Pluto, that is going to be enhanced. Now, it's not a coincidence that on the first and the second time they got together, COVID cases spiked, especially in the US. That's not a coincidence because it brings out the darkness. It brings out what needs to be seen, things that were in the shadows. And hopefully we have had the last spike and now we can slowly go back to life being a little bit more, I wouldn't say normal, because we really are, we're creating a new normal, and that is Pluto. It transforms in a way that it cannot go back to what it was. So we are not going to go back to normal. There is no normal. We are creating a new normal, and that is what is being shaped at the moment. So that month, in April, Pluto also went into retrograde, where it went into its retrograde motion, so it turned more inwards again. In May, we had Saturn going into retrograde in Aquarius, and then it slowly started to move back into Capricorn. Jupiter went into retrograde, and Venus went into retrograde. This is really a year we had like smash packed all of the retrogrades. Venus only goes into retrograde every 18 months, so it is quite rare that everything happened at the same time. Venus went retrograde in Gemini, and when Venus goes into retrograde, things around relationships and finances could have felt a little bit more sluggish, especially with Gemini. There is this contradiction. There is this almost like split personality going on, where it's like, oh, I feel like I can go this way, but I think I should go that way. So it's a little bit like this dance that was going on between the opposite when Venus was into retrograde. Then in June, we had another Mercury retrograde, this time in Cancer. And it was really special because on the summer solstice, the moment that the sun goes into the sign of Cancer, we also had the new moon at 0 degrees Cancer, which also happened to be a solar eclipse. So that was quite an intense time. I know at that moment I was I think I was 40 weeks pregnant. Yeah, 41 weeks actually. So I was really hoping for the baby to be born at that time. She waited a little bit longer, 4 more days actually to be exact. But that was like a spotlight on the way that we deal with our home situation, the way that we deal with the people around us, with our family, with also with our feminine energy, our ability to mother. And it's not only for women, because men mother as well in a very different way. But it really was a highlight on how can we mother in a different way. How can we shift that? Especially because the lunar eclipse and lunar eclipses, a solar eclipse, it always challenge us to look at things differently. It's like wrapping up cycles, connecting cycles. So a lot of old things came up, old wounds, old things that are happening came up in that time. Then we had Neptune going into retrograde. We had Venus going direct again. Venus only went in retrograde a few weeks. It didn't stay there too long. And then we had the second Pluto-Jupiter conjunction when they were both into retrograde. So with those conjunctions, because they happen in threefolds, the first one's really ending cycles. That was like wrapping everything up. Then the second one was much more about learning the lessons. Okay, what are the cycles that have ended in April and in June? How can I integrate them? Then we had in November, it was much more about, okay, so these are the lessons. How can I integrate them so that I can start moving forward again? In July, we had Chiron in Aries going into retrograde. Chiron is our wounded healer. It is our way that we can heal our wounds and teach others, not necessarily teach them by actually teaching, but how can we guide others in what is going on with their deepest wounds, and how can we inspire others in that way. When I went to the retrograde, it's much more, and it's still into retrograde by the way, it is much more about how does our identity, because it's in Aries, how does our identity link into to how we deal with our core wounds, and how we deal with how we are dealing with our fears and our pains. In August, we had Uranus turning retrograde, and in September we had Mars going into retrograde. And I would have to say, like, the Mars retrograde is the one that I got the most questions, comments, responses to, because when Mars goes into retrograde, and it doesn't go into retrograde very often, even more rare than Venus, what happens is that our drive, our passion, our fire is damped. So it is like you want to go, but it doesn't really go. Like you feel like you want to move forward, you feel like you want to do things, but it doesn't quite click. It feels like something is missing. Like frustration would come up, or you would try to do stuff and it just wouldn't work out because you don't even know why. Like it just doesn't work. Especially because Mars was in Aries, which is his home sign. Like Aries is ruled by Mars. Normally that enhances each other, but this time it was really turning the opposite direction, and that is very challenging. That could be, if you look back at that period, because it went direct actually last week. Look back at how did you deal with not having a strong drive, with not having that much focus and energy and aggression in a good way. So aggression not like as like punching people in the face, but aggression as in like this healthy, like this fire to go, like to get all worked up. So that's really good to look back at and really consider how you use that time and what reflections you have on that. And then in September, Jupiter and Saturn also went direct. In October, Pluto went direct, and we had another Mercury retrograde, this time in Scorpio. Again, because this one was together with Mars retrograde and Scorpio, with Mercury retrograde in Scorpio, a lot of stuff came up. Scorpio likes the depth, it likes depth psychology, it likes the unconscious, the deep dark waters that we tend to avoid and not explore. So those topics were all highlighted. Those topics were really spotlighted, and that was challenging because we already had so much on our plate. Most people were slowly getting into the second lockdown and working from home, having kids at home. Like it really changes the way that we look at our lives, our the way that we show up in our communities, the way that we show up in our business, the way we show up in our families. And those challenges, they are highlighted during your retrograde, especially the faster moving planets like Mercury, like Mars. We feel that on a deeper level. That is much more intense. So again, think back of those moments. Think back of when the retrograde happened. How did you feel? Like, what happened? What came up? What are the things that maybe bothered you, but you were able to move through? Alice said, yes, the Mars retrograde was intense but insightful. That is really, really good because they always teach us something. I went with the follow and felt it each day. Feel so much better now. That is direct, yes. Like I'm being pushed forward almost like a slingshot. Ooh, I like that. Yes. Because Mars in Aries is a really strong energy, because this year Mars stays a really long time in Aries, because before it went to retrograde, then we had the retrograde, and then it goes forward again. We have this much more of a yeah, like a slingshot. Like, okay, we've been pulled back, and now it goes direct and like whoosh, and it just goes off. It's actually a very good analogy, Allison. That's awesome. Because I exactly feel the same. Like, it's like the drive comes back, things flow easier, and it just goes effortlessly. You still have to work for it, but it feels more effortless, and it feels more like, oh, I get it. Like, things click faster instead of, I always like to use the word like sluggish, like, it wasn't really, you weren't really stuck, but it also wasn't really moving. So it's awesome that things are moving again. Now this November we had again the Pluto Jupiter. Let me just drink some tea. That's a lot of information already. So in November we had the third and final Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. And like I said, Mars went direct. So now we are at this week. And we still have half of November left, and we have December left. So before we will cover what is happening next year, let's dive into what is happening for us in the next few weeks. We have a Gemini full moon lunar eclipse on the 30th of November. So this is the start of eclipse season. Now, eclipse season is always a connection with bigger cycles. Now, I will go into that in a different video, but each eclipse triggers a larger cycle, where it's a larger cycle of wrapping things up. So we are still building our intensity for this year, because on December 15th we have the Sagittarius new moon and a solar eclipse. Then on the 16th, Saturn enters Aquarius. On the 19th, we have Jupiter entering Aquarius. And then on the 21st, that's the big finale of this year, we have the Sun entering Capricorn, which is the winter solstice. And we have the grand conjunction, which is when Jupiter and Saturn are coming together in 0 degrees Aquarius. Now, this happens every about 19 to 20 years when Jupiter and Saturn come together. But this is the first time they come together in Aquarius in about 400 years, on the top of my head. I could be wrong. I can double check on that, but I believe it's about 400 years the last time that they were together in Aquarius. What I mentioned before about Aquarius is thinking outside the box. It is really revolutionizing everything and coming up with completely new ideas, new ways of thinking. It also is very much a humanitarian. It looks after the groups. It's like looking at the collective. So when Saturn, which is, like I said, the responsible one, the bearer of karma, the Saturn rules our politics, our governments, our systems. When that one turns into Aquarius, combine it with Jupiter, who is the enthusiastic, who is the positive thinker, the expansive one. So if those two come together, imagine this. It's almost like when you're in the water and you're diving and you have the bubbles going up. Once the bubble goes up, it goes faster, 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 and it almost like expands the closer it gets to the surface. And when it's at the surface, it's like poof, it bursts open. And then it's over. So we are still like in this bubble going up, 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 because they're already conjunct, but the peak of their conjunction, the peak of the planets being together is happening on the 21st of December. So we are already in that bubble. We are already going up. And on the 21st, that's when it pops. And that's not when we have the clarity just yet, but that's around that week, I would say, because not just the 21st, but around that week, we could be receiving some deep clarity and some really structural changes. And not just in a government level. This also applies to us as an individual. Where can we shift our the way that we look at the structures, the way that we look at our responsibilities, and how can we like expand that? How can we create something new, something more exciting, something refreshing, something more innovative than we have had before? So the reason why a lot of people are talking about this grand conjunction, this super big thing that is happening, is because it hasn't happened in Aquarius in such a long time. In Aquarius, especially 0 degrees Aquarius. So the energy of the sign, every sign is 30 degrees. When it just moves into 0 degrees, like the new moon at 0 degrees Cancer we had in June, this conjunction happens at 0 degrees Aquarius. So that is when the sign is the strongest, is the it's like the fullest expression of Aquarius. And we are really in need of some fresh air, because Aquarius is an air sign, and 2021 is going to be much more about the air quality, and air signs are much more about thinking, about using your rational mind, but also expanding and seeing things in a different way. Whereas we come from a lot of earth energy this year, which was very heavy, very grounding, very slow moving. The air signs move much faster. They think faster. They are lighter on their feet. It's like bam, 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 things are happening. So next year, we are in for a treat because things will start to move faster. Things will start to pick up pace, but in a way where there is a lot of transformation happening. There's a lot of expansion happening, but it happens on a different level. So here, this year was much more about the earth energy, which is slower moving, which can feel heavier, opposed to the air signs, which is much more it's faster, it's quicker. It's also more sudden, like the rapid change, the rapid transformations that are happening. So that is what is going to happen this month, and we are going to end the year on a full moon in Cancer. We started the full moon, we started the year with a full moon in Cancer, and we're gonna end the year with a full moon in Cancer. Like I said, it was a lot of it doesn't feel like it was a very feminine year. But what I've noticed in a lot of people around me is that the feminine energy is on the rise, not just in women, but also in men, rethinking the way that they work, rethinking the way that they spend time with their family. In every one of us, the feminine is starting to wake up more. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, astrology used to be very based on the patriarchal principles, but we are changing that because there's no good and there's no bad. 2020 has been and still will be a little bit on the challenging and contrasting side, but it is what we do with it. And this year has really taught us that change will come from the root. It was an earth heavy year. So coming from the roots, coming from smaller initiatives, that's where the change happened. Next year, we have to pick up a notch. We have to translate those grassroots organizations, those grassroots changes, to pick it up and then elevate it to actual changing it on a structural level, a government level, a a political level. That is what is going to happen. In the next video, I am going to walk through the first quarter of 2021, and I am going to give you some tips and tools on how to use that energy in your business and in your life, and what are the things that you should be doing, what are things that you should avoid. And this is not, I'm not going to give you the answers, I'm just going to give you some guidelines and tools how to work with that, and use what works for you. Always use your own personal experience, always use your own way of asking, keep asking questions. How does that apply to me? Would that affect me? What can I take from this? And what feels like it is not resonant with me? And I want to leave it with that, because otherwise I'll be speaking for another hour, because I can go on and on about this. If you have any questions after watching this video, let me know in the comments. I'll be happy to answer them. And next week, I'll be back talking more about the first quarter of 2021. If you already have questions about that, let me know, reach out to me, and I can see if I can address them in the live. For now, we still have some interesting things coming up this year. But make sure that you ground yourself. Make sure that you, within the thick of all the things that are happening, you stay true to what is important to you. You stay true to what you believe in, and see that you can move with the energies. Don't resist them. Like the Mars retrograde, resisting the energy is not going to end up well. Move with the energy, and then you will feel so much lighter, it's so much easier and so much more joyful for you. So I will see everybody again next week. Alison, Heine, thank you so much for joining, and I will see all of you again next week.